Hi guys, welcome to my channel Lush Gardener. I hope you guys are fine and are safe. So in today's video we will be talking about how to not kill your succulent. Now this video is going to work out for both people who already have succulents or people who are planning to grow succulents. Now if you are about to buy some succulents, these are the points you need to understand and keep in mind. Now the first and the most important thing before you buy the succulent, ensure that you have the right place where you are going to keep your succulents, which means that the particular place should get a good amount of light. Now either it can be in the form of indirect bright light or direct morning sunlight for 5 to 6 hours. So you'll have to find a space or a spot wherein the succulent is going to get a good amount of light, because light is the most important part in growing your succulents. If you are going to have less light, then the succulent will start to stretch and the succulent will no longer stay compact. In fact, it is also going to lose all the color. So whenever you are about to buy a succulent, or if you already have a succulent, place the succulent in a spot wherein it gets a good amount of indirect bright light or morning direct sunlight for 5 to 6 hours. But if you are putting it out in morning direct sunlight for 5 to 6 hours, you have to ensure that the succulent is completely acclimate. If you're not too sure about the direct sunlight, then the best thing what you can do is keep them in indirect but really bright light. So that was the first point, which is sunlight or the light. So that was the most important part, which is the light. Now the second most important thing is the pot, the container or the pot that you are going to be planting your succulent in. Ensure that the pot is not too big, not too small. I would say ideally if you go with the pot size that is around 8 centimeters to 10 centimeters in depth, and the width is around 8 centimeters or 7 centimeters, it's absolutely fine. But the container, the pot, should have a drain hole. Now if you are just starting off with succulents, I would say it's a good practice to start keeping your succulents in earthen pots like your terracotta pots or concrete pots or unglazed clay pots, even for that matter papercrete pots. If you're not able to make the papercrete pots, it's absolutely fine. Whenever you're going for pot shopping, ensure that you are selecting a pot that is not too big, not too small. It should be of around 8 to 10 centimeters in depth, and the width should not be too much. Around 8 to 7 centimeters in width would work out really well. But ensure that the pot has a drain hole. Now I've spoken about this earlier as well. You can grow your succulents in pots without the drain hole, but that's going to be a little complicated for beginners. So I would suggest, if you are starting off with succulents, have it a good practice to have a drain hole. So ensure that your pot has a drain hole, because the next thing that we are going to be talking is about the soil, and you will be able to understand why a succulent pot should have a drain hole. So now we are done with light, we are done with the pot. Now the next and the most important part is the soil. This is where a lot of people tend to make a mistake. Now the soil mix that I'm talking over here is basically for a lot of succulents like your Echeverias, Sedums, Graptoverias, Graptopetalums, Seduverias, and a lot of other succulents. But there are few succulents that would prefer a little bit different soil, but this is going to be like the base soil, because this is a very gritty sandy soil mix. It's a very well draining soil mix. Now all of the succulents prefer a well draining soil, so you have to keep in mind that whatever type of soil you are using, it has to be very free flowing, loose, porous, and well draining. That's the reason why I said you have to have a drain hole, because we are going to be using a well draining soil. If you do not have a pot that does not have the drain hole, then using a well draining soil makes no sense. So let's not complicate things. Let's keep it pretty simple. Have a pot with a drain hole, and then you can have a soil that is well draining. Now depending upon the type of succulent, you can amend your soil. Now this soil mix, as I said, it works out for almost 80% of the succulents. Some succulents would prefer a little bit more of garden soil, while most of the succulents will do quite well in this kind of mix, especially succulents like Echeverias, which are the most common succulents among succulent keepers. So as you can see, the soil is very loose, very porous, and very lean in nutrients. The soil of your succulent should not be organic rich, otherwise it is going to harm your succulent. So now that our light, our pot and soil is clear. Now the next important thing is watering. Now always ensure, guys, whenever you are watering, water directly into the soil. Do not water on the succulent, do not drop water on the succulent leaves. You have to only water the soil. Ensure that you use a bottle like this, or you can make any kind of bottles. I have the links. You can make a bottle, DIY watering bottle at home as well. As long as the bottle has a nozzle and it points directly to the soil and tends to water the soil, it is going to work out really well. Always remember, it's very simple. You only need to water the soil and nothing on the succulent. Now this is how you are going to water your succulent. The next thing, how and when to water. Now your watering is not going to remain same throughout the year. Your watering will change as per the season. A lot of people I have seen, they say that you water your succulent only once a week. That is not how it tends to work out. Now in my city, during summers, I tend to water my succulents every 3 or 4 days. During summers, because it's very dry and it's very warm, so I tend to water every 3 or 4 days. Again, this completely depends from environment, from what location you belong to. If I'm watering every 3 to 4 days, doesn't mean that you also have to water every 3 to 4 days. It completely depends upon your environment and your climate. Now, as I said, in summers, I tend to water my succulents every 3 to 4 days. But once the summers are gone and the monsoon season tends to arrive, I do not water my succulents up to 1 to 2 weeks. As you can see, now I was watering my succulents every 3 to 4 days during summers, but as soon as the monsoons come in, there is going to be a lot of rain, there's going to be a lot of moisture in the air. So I cut down on my watering. I go probably 1, or at times I even water my succulents once in 2 weeks. Again, after monsoon, I have another season that's called as the winter season. Again, during winter season, I cut down on the water majorly. I tend to water again either once in 2 weeks or once in 3 weeks, depending upon how fast the soil tends to dry. So you cannot have the same watering schedule throughout the year. You need to check when your soil tends to dry, how fast your soil tends to dry. According to that, you'll have to water. There are a lot of factors that affect in watering. Basically, the type of pot, what size of pot, what is the type of soil you're using, what type of succulent you have, because some succulents love a little bit more watering compared to other succulents. So there are a lot of factors that depend on your watering. The type of pot, the size of pot, the type of soil, the type of succulent, how much amount of sunlight your succulent tends to give. Again, a lot of people say water your succulents once a week. That is completely incorrect. You need to check a lot of things before watering your succulents. Now, the next important thing after watering is to keep your succulent leaves clean from dust. Because remember, guys, if you're growing your succulents outdoor, there could be a lot of dust that could settle onto your succulents. So it's a good practice to blow off the dust. Now, as I said, never touch your succulent leaves. It's always better to use a blower like this, or you can use a soft bristled makeup brush. Anyone can work out. I feel that the succulent blower tends to work out really well because you actually do not come in contact with the succulent, and with the help of this blower, all of that excess dust or anything that tends to settle in between the leaves, or let's say in between the succulent, or let's say the water droplets as well, in case if it tends to accidentally fall on your succulent leaves, you can always clean it with the help of a succulent blower. So it's pretty simple. Just keep your succulent leaves clean, because when the dust tends to settle over the period of time, it tends to create a film on the succulent leaves, and it might be a little difficult for the succulent to breathe, especially during the time of photosynthesis. So it's better either once a week or once in 2 weeks, you can just take a succulent blower and just blow off all the dust. So when you're cleaning your succulents of the dust, it's also a good practice to check on the bugs, because pest can be an issue for succulents, especially the mealybugs. So whenever you're doing a routine cleaning once a week or once in 2 weeks, it's also good to just do a routine check. Just check around the succulents, just check the stem area, just tilt the pot slightly and check underneath the leaves if there are any dry leaves, if there are any mealybugs or any aphids or any ants. It's always better to do a routine check. You can use cinnamon powder, you can use whatever organic solution you have been using. So it's always good to do a routine check, because as I've said this earlier as well, the earlier you notice the bugs, if you tend to stop them at an early stage, it is going to work out really well for your succulent. And if the infestation tends to increase a lot, then that can be a big issue. So whenever you see 1 mealybug or 2 mealybugs, quickly get into action and try to clear them off. The earlier, the much better. Now everything is said and done. We have spoken everything from light, watering, soil, pot, the cleaning. The last thing would be fertilizers. Now guys, I have kept this point as the last point because it's not necessary that you have to add fertilizers to your succulents. If you do not add fertilizers to your succulents, it's absolutely fine. Your succulent will still continue to grow. You can see this is a perfect example. Not even a single drop of fertilizer was added to the succulent. This succulent has been with me for almost 2 to 3 years now, and it is doing extremely well. You can see it has those beautiful tips. It is doing extremely well. All the leaves are well hydrated. I do not use any fertilizers, but in case if you want to add fertilizers, you can go for any liquid based fertilizer, probably a seaweed fertilizer, but always remember, dilute it before adding it to your succulent. You can take 1/4 of what's mentioned on the label. Usually they tend to say to use half a cup of the seaweed solution and then mix it in water, a liter of water. I would say go with 1/4 of the liquid fertilizer and then dilute it in a liter of water. Always ensure that the soil has to be wet when you're adding fertilizers. Do not add fertilizers directly to dry soil. It will harm the succulent. Do not use the seaweed in a concentrated form, even if it is like 1/4. I have seen a lot of people tend to use 1/4 of seaweed and just directly add it to the soil. That is a very wrong practice. Even that small little quantity of 1/4 of seaweed solution can burn your succulent roots. So ensure that you do not follow that wrong practice. Always mix it in a liter of water and then give it to your succulent. Never add any kind of fertilizers to dry soil. So guys, that's all about it. These were the few key points that you need to keep in mind, especially if you are about to get into succulents, or if you already have succulents, you can follow these steps and trust me, the succulent will do quite well. So guys, I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button, and thank you so much for watching.